Hello, this video picks up where the last one left off. I am now going to go through tasks 3 and 4 in the first AAT AMAC paper. So that's the one I've just finished. We're now on to task 3, which is 18 marks. This will be computer marked about flexed budgets and standard costing. So there can't be any writing on this, which kind of leads me to the conclusion that you're not going to be asked to write about reasons for variances, which is somewhat surprising because that would lend itself to a written question. Unlikely you're going to be asked to write about the different types of standards, ideal, basic, attainable, etc. Never say never, but you're not going to get writing in task 3, and this is the one that's about flexed budgets and standard costing. Right, so the first part, Tubbs Limited manufacture plant pots from recycled plastic, which they sell to garden centres in the UK. You have been provided with the following activity data. We've then got some information. And then we are asked, first of all, to prepare the direct material cost statement from the information provided above. So we've got to work out our material variances. Right, so I would start by working out my, in this case, material usage variance. So comparing my flex budget figure, so what did I expect to use and what did I expect to pay for it, is my first calculation. And in fact, it would be quite handy to work that out first because that's what's asked for in that top box of this particular question. Right, so what did I expect to pay for what I expected to use? So the standard quantity, let's have a look. So I expected each pot to use 0.02 kilograms. I've actually made 1 million. So I expected to use 20,000 kilos and I expected to pay £2 per kilo. So 20,000 kilos at £2 per kilo is £40,000. That's like my flexed budget figure. I then need to compare that to the actual quantity of material that I used, again at the standard price, so the £2. So how much material did I actually use here? Well, I made 1 million and I used 0.019 kilos per pot. So I actually used 19,000 kilograms, which I multiplied by the 2, which is 38,000. So I've used, or I've spent £2,000 less because I used less for each item. So I've got 2,000 there as an adverse variance. Sorry, I'm just looking to see. So, oh no, sorry, what am I talking about? It's a favourable variance, isn't it? Right, so favourable variance because I used less than I expected. I'm just looking at the instructions, so if it's adverse, I need to put it in brackets. Right, then we move on to the price variance. So I've just worked out that the actual quantity at the standard price was £38,000. But then I need to compare that to what I actually spent. So I actually did 19,000 kilos at £1.82 for each one. So that comes out at 34,580. So if I compare the 38,000 at the standard price with the 34,580 at the actual price, then that gives me favourable variance of 3420. Again, makes sense because the cost per kilo is lower than I expected. And then it's conveniently worked out the bottom figure for me, which was just the sum of the other two variances. Part B. Based on the discussion with the production manager for each of the statements below, we need to identify whether the statement impacts upon standard price or on standard usage, and then calculate the revised standard price or standard usage based on the statement. Now, before we do that, let's just have a look at the full information that's been provided. So the first one we're looking at is the overall increase in availability of materials had recently reduced recycled plastic prices by 20%. It is not known whether this will continue. Right, so what's the impact then? So it's a reduction in price, so it's going to affect the price standard. It's come down by 20%. So these are the choices. So it was £2. It's come down by 20%. So 80% of £2 is £1.60. Right, the materials have been sourced, right, again, I'm just going to go up because there's a little bit more information here. The materials had been sourced from a different supplier who promised better quality, but at a slightly higher price. The usual supplier of these materials will resume deliveries next period. So in other words, we've kind of deviated from our norm very briefly, promise better quality, slightly higher price, but we're going back. So impact on the standards then will be none because it was only a temporary deviation. So therefore we cannot calculate again, I don't quite like what they've written. I would say it's just not applicable because there's no impact on the standards, but that's our best choice. And then their major customers had requested a decrease in the standard pot size by 5%, which was applied to all items produced. Again, is that exactly the same as it says? Yeah. So that's to do with usage. Usage coming down by 5%. So if we look at the original data, we thought we were going to use 0.02 kilograms. So if I work out what 95% of that is, I actually get what we actually used, which was 0.019 kilograms. And then complete the following statements about whether or not Tubbs Limited should change the standards. So the price standard, remember, they said that extra bit of information, it is not known whether this will continue. Increase in, so it's a little bit of a grey area, but we don't know if it will continue. So we're going to go with it should not be changed, as this will only be a short-term impact. Right, so if we went changing the standard and then it changes, the price sort of was just a short-term fluctuation, then we have to move the standard back again. It's a bit of a palaver. So should not be changed as a short-term impact. If this standard is changed, it could have possibly a demotivating effect on the budget holder, because basically saying, right, you've got to get it for this cheaper price now, but it might have just been a blip in the market. So if they can never possibly get that price moving forwards, then it wouldn't be a good management tool. So then the usage standards, so this is at the request of the major customer. So this one should be changed, as this will have a long-term impact. If this standard is changed, it could have, so that would be motivating effect on the budget holder. because you know they would want to make sure that they're meeting the standard required by the customer. Not too keen on that question, not going to lie, but there we go. Right, number 4. So this is where we see some more writing coming in. So this is a 20-mark question, of which 12 marks, possibly even 14 marks, it varies between the 2 AAT papers, will be written. And what I think you can expect is a short computation, then an applied piece of writing, and then just a kind of a knowledge-based bit of writing. So some applied to the computation in the scenario and some just based on your knowledge. So this is on activity-based costing, which I think is a top tip for the real exam. Seems to be very popular with the AAT. So let's have a look. Roasted Limited is a medium-sized coffee manufacturing company that produces 2 products, ground coffee and coffee beans. The company has invested in new integrated technologies throughout all sections of the business, from the use of robotics in the production line through to reporting software in the accounting function. A traditional absorption costing method is currently used, and it has been suggested that activity-based costing may be more appropriate following the introduction of improved technologies throughout the company. So that seems to make sense because traditional absorption costing was used when, you know, we had very labour, machine intensive manufacturing businesses. Things are sort of moving towards more technology, which means that there's more overheads but less direct costs. So the overheads are making up a bigger proportion of the costs of manufacture. So using activity-based costing can be seen as a more sophisticated and more accurate way of allocating and apportioning those overheads. Right, so what have we got to do? So we've got to calculate the direct costs and production overheads per unit for the 2 different products using the traditional direct labour hours absorption method. Right, so traditional method, we need to know what is the total overhead. So the total overhead is going to be these 2 numbers added together, the 400 and the 960,000. So that comes to total overhead of 1,360,000. We then need to divide that by the total hours. So to calculate the total hours, I'm doing this, by the way, to work out the overhead absorption rate per labour hour. So the total hours are going to be, so I need 4 hours times 40,000 units for the ground coffee. That's 160,000 hours. And then add on 6 times the 30,000, which is 180,000 hours. So altogether, that gives me 340,000 hours. Right, so to work out my overhead absorption rate, I'm going to do the £1,360,000 of overheads divided by my total 340,000 hours, which works out at £4 per hour. So hold that thought and then let's start filling this in. So remember, my overhead absorption rate is £4 per labour hour. So for ground coffee, my direct costs are going to be materials, £10, plus 4 hours at £10 an hour, which is £40. So that gives me £50 of direct cost. My production overheads, so remember it's £4 per labour hour. I'm using 4 hours. So, oh, hang on a minute, 2 secs. What have I done there? Oh, I'm looking at the wrong part. Sorry. Yeah, so it's 4 hours times the £4. I looked at the wrong bit and thought I'd calculated it wrong. That's fine. Which is 16. And then we do the same for coffee beans. So we've got £11 of materials. We've got 6 times £10, which is 60. So add 60 to 11 gives me £71. Production overhead, remember it's £4 per hour. So 4 times 6 is 24. So that is the end of part A. So I've worked out it costs £66 to make ground coffee per unit and £95 for coffee beans per unit. Then we're going to go on and use activity-based costing instead. So our direct cost, oh, this is interesting. Look, it's filled that in. So when oh, look, that's clever. When I filled in that 50 there, it's automatically filled it in here for me. That bit's the same as before. My inspections, right, so let's go to activity-based costing now. So I've got £400,000. That is spread across a total of 800 inspections. So 400,000 divided by 800 is £500 per inspection. The ground coffee is 680 of those. So £500 times 680 gives me £340,000 of this total is going for the ground coffee. That's to make 40,000 units. So £340,000 divided by 40,000 units gives me £8.50 for the ground coffee inspections. Right, let's do the coffee beans for inspections while we're at it. So remember, we have done 400,000 divided by the total. So I divide by the 800 inspections, gave me £500 per inspection. Now times that by the 120. So that works out at £60,000. Divide that by the 30,000 units, works out to be £2 for the coffee beans. Right, IT support, same method, so let's do this a bit more quickly. So we've got 960,000 divided by 24,000 hours. So that gives me £40 per support hour. I will times that by 20,000 for the ground coffee. So that gives me £800,000. Divide by the 40,000 units. Gives me a figure of £20 per unit for the ground coffee. Quite expensive for IT support. Coffee beans, the same method. So £40 per support hour times by the 4,000 hours for that department. That gives me £160,000. Divide by the 30,000 units is £5.33. Right, so you can see quite a different story. So here, coffee beans much more expensive per unit on the traditional method. Now, pretty much of a muchness. So part C, discuss the differences between the product cost calculated using traditional absorption costing and the activity-based costing. Right, so this is how I would approach this. So I've said when using traditional absorption costing, the ground coffee works out cheaper per unit at £66 compared to £95 for the coffee beans. So important that you are applying your answer to the scenario. I've then gone on to say this would have been a reasonable, can't type, method to use to absorb overheads when production was more labour intensive, because it assumed, probably correctly, that it took, that the longer it took to make a product, the more overhead should be apportioned. Next paragraph. By the way, in the exam, as long as they can understand what you've typed, they don't worry too much about spelling, punctuation and grammar. Obviously, it can't be illegible. So now that the business has improved technologies and is less labour intensive, activity-based costing, and if I put ABC there in brackets, I can use that abbreviation moving forward. Activity-based costing is likely to be beneficial. Using ABC, see what I mean? The overheads are weighted towards the ground coffee product because it generates by far more inspections and IT support hours, being the cost drivers for the overheads. So good to get a bit of terminology in, cost drivers for activity-based costing. Using ABC, the unit costs of the two products are virtually the same, despite the coffee beans having much higher direct costs. Right, so that's what I would write for 6 marks. So roughly speaking, sort of 3 marks talking about absorption, 3 marks talking about activity-based costing, making sure that you've got a balance. If we look at what the mark scheme says, they give you a kind of grid. You can look this up on the answers on the AAT website. So it gives you indicative content. It gives you ideas about what you can talk about. It also says their own figure rule. So if you went wrong with your calculations, but then you talked correctly about your wrong calculations, you would still get credit in the written part of this task. And then it sort of says, you know, to get 5 or 6 marks, it says the response presents a full discussion of the differences between the product costs, demonstrating a thorough understanding of how the 2 different costing methods affect the outcome. So that's sort of what they're judging on. Right, then in this task it goes on, part D, explain the benefits that the activity-based costing system may have over the traditional absorption costing. Again, we need to look out for those command words, discuss. So, you know, give it some more substance, explain. You can't just list them, like you can't just learn them and list them. Although somewhat interestingly, the mark scheme here, it says 1 mark for reference to the following points, maximum 3 marks. Any other relevant points may be awarded marks. So hopefully in your preparation, you have got some advantages of why activity-based costing is a good idea. So I would start by saying the main advantage of ABC is that it provides a more accurate cost per unit. This is beneficial to the business when it comes to price setting and also consideration around product mix. i.e. which product to concentrate on, maybe stopping production of another. You could go on and explain that further if you wanted, but I think that's sufficient. Another advantage, no, I'd probably then say, what did I write in my answer here? Oh yeah, so another advantage is that the process of activity-based costing provides managers with an insight into what processes are driving costs, and therefore it can focus efficiency measures. Yeah, so if you know what's driving a cost, then you can sort of perhaps take steps to not generate that cost quite so often. And then I think my third point, now I think I've done too much here. I mean, I would say that might be enough, but to be on the safe side, I would probably go on and make a third point. So furthermore, and I think we need to probably talk about the technology benefit here. As this business has become more technology focused, activity-based costing, let's say it would, more technology focused, it would have a higher proportion of overheads, and so it becomes more important that these are correctly allocated and apportioned, which ABC is able to achieve. Right, so as I say, I think that's way too much for 3 marks, because I would say that's more like 6 marks, because I've stated an advantage and then sort of explained it. But if I was in the exam and I knew all of those, then I would go for it, because, you know, I'm still not even an hour in and I've been stopping and starting and videoing and I'm on task 4 already. Explain how the use of technology can provide benefit to Roasted's operational control processes. Right, so using technology to its operational control processes. So operational control is about, you know, how are we managing things like our inventory, for example, our labour, our workforce. So how can technology improve? Explain. So again, looking for a number of short paragraphs, not just stating, but actually explaining how it can help. So technology can help speed up operations. For example, does it give us any clues in the question? This introduction of improved technologies from robotics in the production line. So we could use that as an example. Using robotics in the production line will be quicker and also will free up workers for other tasks. Okay, so that would be one. Technology can help improve efficiency of running the business, as it could be quicker to make each unit and perhaps have less wastage. What else can technology do? Technology could be used to manage inventory more efficiently, I'm thinking. For example, monitoring stock levels and automating the ordering process. Right, so make it as practical as possible. I mean, when I'm looking at their MART scheme, it's not brilliant. It just says the use of technologies can help a business speed up processes. If technology is used to replace tasks, this allows managers to focus on key areas. Effective technology can therefore improve overall efficiencies. I like my answer better. All right, but you can expect some writing about using technology. It is one of the key strands that goes through the AAT's new curriculum. So, you know, stuff about using cloud-based systems, using what's the other thing? Data sort of analytics. I think you can expect to have to write something on a technology theme. So do make sure that you have revised that area well. Okay, so that concludes tasks 3 and 4, and it will be the end of this video.